Ian, it's good to have you on the podcast. And I was just reminiscing right before jumping on about how we met. And we met in Seoul, South Korea. I can't remember the year, but we met through our mutual friend Brian Ju. Do you remember that day?
Yeah. It was at his gym, right? That was like the first time.
Yeah, I believe it was at his gym, or it was after a seminar I taught, and then we hung out that night.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember. It was seems like a whole nother like lifetime ago. It's been too long. Been too much too long.
Yeah, it's been at least a decade.
Yeah, I suppose so. I think one of the big things that definitely yeah, kind of changed up as far as like time perspective was the whole pandemic COVID time. Um it just seemed like everything was really in a weird tailspin during that time. And I think obviously like each of us are kind of going down our own paths with regards to where we are in our careers. But yeah, I think it's easy to get caught up obviously in like your own world and forget to kind of work on maintaining or keeping up with various like social like structures that we have around us. But yeah, I mean, that's what I was really excited to be able to jump onto to your podcast and, not only be able to talk about the things that we'll talk about, but just to catch up with you as well. See where you're at as well.
Yeah, it's super cool, and I'm glad you could make the time. I believe you're in Portugal right now. Is that correct, or are you in Turkey?
Turkey now. Yeah.
Okay.
Been jumping around a lot for the last month. It's a lot more tiring than I would have thought. And I had a lot of friends who've been doing the workshops and the touring and all that kind of thing for a few years. And it's one of those things where people can tell you about the grind, but it's always hard to know for sure until you start doing it yourself.
Yeah, it's I did it for a long time, and my body took a toll, and I wish I had done it different now looking back, but that's for another time to explore. But I am very curious because when we first met, you were doing gymnastic bodies through Coach Sommer, and that was
Yeah.
one of your things that you were excited about. I'm curious today, more than a decade later, where do you spend your time thinking about health, fitness, movement?
Yeah. You know, like I had originally started, I suppose, like a lot of kids in the USA with team sports. Um, there was obviously a lot of focus on, especially for like American football, just getting bigger, stronger, faster. And there's a almost like an honor to be able to like sacrifice your body for the betterment of the team and its success. And though I wouldn't give up those days for anything because I had amazing experiences, but progressing from there into CrossFit and bodybuilding and other fitness arenas, working with clients, like one of the biggest things that I kind of started shifting towards was just not only just the performance aspect of things, but also the longevity kind of component of life. And like many of those that have played contact sports or any team sports, is like I had my own fair share of injuries. So when I was introduced to Gymnastic Bodies, it was kind of heading down that route a bit. I think, with regards to actually like having a business, it's quite a niche arena with regards to gymnastic strength training and working on, flexibility and those kind of things. And so we originally opened up Nirvana Strength with that idea of being an affiliate for Gymnastic Bodies, and we ended up not going down that route. That was more of not that we lost confidence in Gymnastic Bodies in the product in itself, but it was more of a leadership issue. But that's another story for another day. But it worked out for the best, and it always kind of makes me think of I don't know if you know this story about the farmer and like his son and horse. It starts with
Familiar.
yeah, so it's like he had the
Maybe.
horse on. Yeah. So it's like everything's about in any given situation, whether it's like good luck or bad luck, it's hard to, maybe in the moment of time you can have a certain perspective, but when you wait, give it some time to process and understand the greater ramifications of the situation and what has happened, something that could initially uh, be good or be bad could go completely the other direction.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, looking back, I found it to have been like a very good thing that whole thing kind of fell apart. Um, and, and it kind of speaks to the greater level of like, building some level of like resiliency and adaptability, to be able to handle the uncertainties of life. And I tried to take a lot of those philosophies and apply it to the training modalities that I kind of delve into and that I promote with my clients.
Hmm. Yeah. So for those listening, first and foremost, the I guess the proverb or story or parable, whatever you would call it, about the farmer and his son was something along the lines of they had a horse, they lost the horse, and or the horse ran away or something happened, and the son was devastated. It was a problem, and the dad said, well, we'll see, we shall see, or
Yeah.
maybe this is a bad thing. And then they found a wild horse that just walked into the farm, and they were able to train it and make it theirs, and they were so excited, and this is the best thing that's ever happened. The dad said, well, we shall see, or maybe. And then the son falls off the horse, gets injured. Oh, this is catastrophic. And the dad says, well, maybe. And then there was a time to go to war. Thankfully, the son was injured, couldn't go to war. So everybody was like, oh, man, this is the greatest thing. Well, maybe.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think that's just me paraphrasing, and you should look it up because that's my version. But in regards to you, Ian, and Nirvana Strength and the journey that you've gone through, I'm curious, when you first started Nirvana Strength, why in Bali? One, and two, what were you excited about at that time? Like, what was driving you to want to do this? Because it's a big undertaking to start a business.
Yeah, it was, one of the biggest things that kind of pushed me in that direction was Gymnastic Bodies, and again, that was like, at the time, a very good thing, and it kind of pushed me to do things that I wasn't probably really expecting to do. Even looking back, the things that I was supposed to be really good at, I I don't know if I was actually as good as I thought I was at the time. And not that it's a necessarily negative, but I think there's a certain level of um, naivety that you need to have to be able to take certain risks, because there is that other side where if you think you're going to get everything perfect before you start, you'll generally not do anything. Um, and so Bali was a really good location to decide on, just through a lot of, internet research and looking at a company like, for example, the Global Wellness Institute. They're a very big nonprofit organization that focuses on the wellness industry globally. And they put out some like amazing white papers and informational papers on the industry and trends and regions that are really growing in the wellness realm. And Bali just kind of seemed at that point to be a big epicenter in the world as far as really pushing alternative medicine and alternative modalities towards health. The facility as a whole was geared around longevity, really focusing on increasing health span and doing it under the training philosophies of using body weight training primarily. Um, even though we started with certain ideas and principles as far as what the training would look like at the beginning, through the years of meeting other high level practitioners, many of whom might not even be very well known. So this is a thing I think for people to kind of understand, is that just because you're very popular doesn't mean that you're necessarily very good. And also vice versa. Like I've met great coaches who have zero following on any kind of social media platform, and they're some of the smartest guys I've ever met. Um, and I've had a lot of influence from a lot of different people, even yourself, following you in your career and how you just like how you talk. You have a very you could probably convince me to do anything really, like just the way you like talk, and very calming, and you're very assuring. And I think even on an individual level, it works to help get people in a better mindset on a more behavioral level to kind of change things for the long term. Because as much as anybody that's in the personal training industry or works with client 101 knows that we're not really just there only to give them a program and train them. Is like we also end up kind of serving as like a therapist to some degree. And so you work with them. And I thought that on a grander scale, like Nirvana Strength was a nice way of building a large facility that kind of helped facilitate that on just a larger scale, as opposed to just purely just one-on-one.
Yeah, I mean, I love that was the intention and mission, and that you were able to see it through for so long. Something that I'm just curious about right now in terms of, just your Instagram handle, Stoic Mobility. I believe that I imagine Stoicism is part of your philosophy and way of thinking. Was Buddhism a part of it too, and that's why it was called Nirvana?
Yeah. So yeah, the Nirvana name, Nirvana Strength. The idea of it was that that all of us are striving to be our best self or our ultimate self, and they're all inherently striving for this mountain peak that we're at. We're obviously at different points in that journey, but to reach our inherently like our ultimate being, our ultimate self, we needed to kind of cultivate an environment and a philosophy that kind of helps people along that journey. And yeah, there is some level of Stoicism that I'm really big fan of, because with regards to the philosophy in itself, it's a lot more focused on just practical living and practical tips, as far as instead of just like talking about theoretical stuff that we might not necessarily ever find an answer for. And also too, like probably more recent than that, like I've been delving a lot into Buddhism as well, like more on a philosophical level as opposed to religious level. There's a lot of overlap between the two. And I think that there's this constant process, even if we think about meditation or having a good introspective practice, it's, not only trying to decide like what are these external things that are within our control or not, and then also understanding that we also fight kind of an internal battle or internal war with ourselves. And it's not one of these things that kind of have like a finality to it. It's always a constant like work in progress.
Yeah. Work in progress, constant state of adaptation. I think that's the name of the game when it comes to life. And I think even before starting to record here, we were talking about aging a little bit. And you being 38, I'm 41. I'm currently wearing these reading glasses. I don't wear them every day, but sometimes when I'm podcasting, I do wear them just because I'm looking at things that I can't see as well as I used to see. And yeah, we're always evolving. And like you said, this internal battle that we face, it's kind of like you never arrive. It doesn't matter how successful you become, how fit you become, the results you become. There's always something internally that's evolving, and this relationship to our internal world, I think, is fundamental. I'm curious for you, as you've gone through the journey of developing a business and now being out of the business and living more of a nomadic lifestyle, teaching around the world. What have been some of the pivotal moments that have served as a positive inflection point for you in your understanding of who you are in this world, what you do, and what it means to be human?
And I think I think our connection And, even me being on your podcast is a really good example of there's a greater ripple effect to our lives than we may know, because generally when we're living our lives, we're very much in a kind of, we have blinders on, right? We're very much in like tunnel vision. And even understanding the positive benefits that we put out into the world, even on a one-to-one level with individuals. And I think the more, when I think of you as like a very authentic person, and the way that you talk with people, like, though, there's a very much, personable connection that you make with people when you talk with them one-to-one. And it might not necessarily be, a, side thought, but the way you interact with people on a day-to-day basis, how you're invested with them, has this massive ripple effect that you might not even know about. And, I'm sure for yourself, like, though you might not even be aware of like how much influence you've had on the greater world of, CrossFit and fitness and health and wellness, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that follow you that don't, go out of their way to try and make contact with you. They may listen to your podcasts, every time a new episode goes up. And I think that it just goes down to like trying to put positive energy into the world. And I think if you can do that with a certain level of integrity, I think that it's really hard to not think that there's a purpose to each person's life. And it doesn't have to be on a massive platform or anything like that. Just within your own community, whatever that might be, it's more than enough. So, and I would probably, ask you as well, as like, you've gone through a few transitions in your life, what are some things that have really helped you go through that process? Because I know for me, getting out of Nirvana, it was, it was like it was my first business. It's kind of like my baby. And I went through this whole like process of like, basically I compared it with like, if I was raising a kid and my kid was like now leaving the house and going off to like university, living their own life. It was, I think it's like the whole, the like empty nest syndrome kind of thing. But yeah, I'm interested to kind of even hear your story with regards to your transition.
Yeah. I mean, my first big transition was when I realized that I wasn't going to go to the Olympics in gymnastics. That's something that I just wanted to do so bad. And not going to the Olympics made me feel like a failure. But I was so young that I was able to just transition to the next thing. And I got into action sports, and it was very fun and cool, and it was just exciting. And then I got into this phase where I didn't talk about this, but I wanted to be popular. I just wanted to be famous. I wanted to be known for something. And that was very ego-driven. And that's what brought me to the US and start pursuing things like, I started doing some acting and modeling and whatever. I just thought, I just need to get in front of a camera. That's the way I'm going to make it. And then I realized, oh, wait a second. You need actual talent to to be an actor, or you can't just do this thing. And then that just had me chuckling. But what happened then was I fell back on gymnastics. And when I fell back onto my gymnastics background, all of a sudden I realized that I had something really meaningful to contribute. And I was so excited about feeling significant. And that was the first time I was like, wow, in this world, when you do what you're curious about, you're interested in, and you know something about, and you maybe have a little bit of talent in, things start to feel complete. And then, of course, I went into the inflection point of, I want to make more money. I want to be more successful. How do I get there? And then striking gold when I found CrossFit, and there being able to blow up to some degree. And then having this successful career, published book, all these things, money coming in, recognition, all that, feeling like a shell of myself because there was something missing. And the something missing was a true sense of peace with who I am like truly am, and realizing that I was scared, I was terrified of showcasing to the world that which was behind the scenes, which was anxiety, an insane ego, wanting to, just have control over things that were out of my control. And the moment I started to let those come out, which were not because I wanted to, they just happened because I was so broken down. That's when things kind of started to feel a little bit more complete again. But now I had a disconnect from my career, from my profession, from the persona that I had created. And where I am today is I'm living in the place where those two worlds, my outer world and my inner world, are finally starting to come together. And something that's helping me do that is not only the work that I do today, but also having these conversations and reconnecting with people that, just like yourself, that I've met through my journey that are helping me. Like, this is at the most selfish level, this is helping me understand that which I can contribute to the world, and how I can work with it in a way that can, maybe lead to a place of greater peace, better outcomes, greater health, whatever we want to call it.
Yeah, I mean, I think even the word selfish and people's understanding of that word, typically it's used in a kind of very negative way and very negative connotation towards it. I think generally anything that is selfish in a negative way tends to be just the things that you obviously do for yourself, but you do it at the expense of someone else. So it's actually harming other people, maybe in a very direct way. But I think generally people should be more selfish in the positive sense that by working on yourself and making yourself a much better person, you're actually able to help other people in a more positive way. And so I think a lot of the whole category of books and videos on YouTube with regards to like self-development, like that's in the same realm, right? It's like, I think people naturally just want to be better people and they want to be their best version, whether they know how to like actively do that or not. Sometimes they're presented with a challenge or an obstacle that forces them to become better. I think just understanding that, like, what does selfish actually mean? And is it being done in a way that actually leads to greater positivity maybe later down the line, as opposed to, are you actually doing something negative towards other people in a, either direct or indirect way?
Yeah. I don't know. Hopefully, right? That's kind of maybe we shall see. Either way, so now you are no longer an owner of Nirvana Strength, but Nirvana Strength continues on. How do you feel about it? What led to the decision of going separate ways? Where are you at today with that?
Yeah, so me and my original business partner, like, we ran the facility for about 5 years. We started off, even though it was a quite large facility, about 1,600 square meters, which I think is somewhere around like 5,000 square feet. It was very much a mom and pop operation. Like, we're a boutique operations at that time. Luckily we were able to take an idea of what a health and wellness fitness facility would be like at this scale. And neither one of us and the many others have said the same, but we don't know of any facilities that have, or of that size and doing the things that we tried to do. So I like the idea that we were able to, take a relatively new or not necessarily a popular concept and try to really build it into kind of the mecca of health and wellness from the fitness side. And yeah, eventually, we, wanted to try to go a little bit faster as far as like the expansion and the renovations go. And we're looking at, the possibility of expanding into other regions. And so we decided on taking some new investors who had some kind of background in that, and more of the business side, and more of, figuring out better ways with regards to like operations and everything on a more kind of global market scale. It was going in good ways at the beginning. I think the more and more I realized that it was kind of heading down a direction that shifted, not necessarily like it was just shifting too much away from what I originally kind of wanted as far as a facility goes. Me and my original business partner were coaches at heart, and very much got into the business to be in health and wellness, and really invested in our client base. There is a certain level when things start becoming more and more commercialized. They also become more and more automated. There's a lot more systems in place. There's a lot more structure that inherently disconnects the client base from maybe management, I suppose, or the coaches in themselves. So I felt like, yeah, it's definitely going down a significant like direction as far as being more commercial. And I just felt like there was just not as much heart into the facility as I would have liked. And so I'm very much into coaching, trying to build a community, build in an environment that actually helps foster like real like growth, not so much as just having a place that just kind of does its own thing. Because if you don't have people that are going to host and kind of help like grow the environment, you're left to, the environment is completely left up to grow in a manner that is very much dictated by whoever's coming in. And when you let everybody in, you don't know if it's going to go good or bad. So yeah, shifting away from Nirvana, it's definitely allowed me to like go back and really focus on the things that I really enjoy, which is trying to get people in a different mindset with regards to like health, wellness, education, learning about themselves better. And hopefully, from all the lessons that I've learned from that business, I can, learn as much of it as possible and shift it into the next business, and make the second or third time around like more successful.
Yeah, which kind of reminds me of this idea of I think it was Seth Godin, and I forget if he said 100 or 1,000 true fans. It's right. This idea of being able to nurture a true relationship with your clientele, your customer base, that when you start to think about scaling a business and trying to do it in a way that is scaling exponentially, that there's a loss there of human connection and deep work, and maybe even authenticity because of the mechanics of developing a business. Is that what you were experiencing? Was there internal dissonance because of that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely a little bit harder with regards to like the location, because it's very much tour centric. So, you're getting a whole new like client base every week. You just have new people coming in all the time, and it's not. So like if you had more of a domestic market location where your member base is like rock solid, you have your OGs who have been there for a long time. They are actually an extension of the owners and the head coach, because they've been there long enough to know the culture and the environment, and they actually help build the culture and the environment, especially when new people come in. When you have a facility that doesn't have that, where even people who have been there for a long time, they're leaving 6 months of the year, you don't have the OGs there to help facilitate that environment, that culture. And I think that's something that's not really understood by some business owners in that kind of realm, is that if you have a strong foundation of solid members, you can actually leave the facility and the facility is not going to collapse because there's a really strong group of people to help maintain it. In this kind of environment, being in a more tourist centric area, you kind of have to be on it all the time because it's very easy. Like after 2-3 weeks, it's going to be a whole group of people that don't know anything. And I think that was really lost. It was basically like you come in, you just see the nice looking facility. It looks pretty. But I think deep down, it's like people really know if you're speaking from an authentic point of view, or if you have a really like invested interest in their growth and their health. You can almost feel it in a lot of facilities. As soon as you walk in, you can almost feel that energy. And I feel like that energy was being lost.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that, and that's a troubling feeling when you are a practitioner like yourself and somebody who's a coach at heart and really wants to foster an environment that is conducive for growth. That is, it's really challenging. I'm curious, did at any level doing business in a country like Indonesia, which I assume is a little bit under the table, all of a sudden there's a little corruption there. Maybe people don't do things by the book. Did that influence how you were doing business at the time?
You have to, because of the environment and where you're at, I think it goes with any kind of business or whatever country you might go into, is like understanding that obviously not every country operates in the same manner. What is acceptable in one country is frowned upon in another. And, there's always this idea of, even being in Portugal and Spain and now Istanbul, is like you talk with the people who, or the local people, and though the inherent problems that they all face are, to some degree different or exacerbated in one area versus another, they all the conversations, there always some level of distrust towards the people who are, in power, or the government, or wherever those belongs. So with regards to the idea of corruption, sometimes, things are, done in certain ways that doesn't necessarily seem very appropriate. But there's definitely a lot of things that I think it's just a lot of gray area. There's just not a lot of black and white sometimes. So a really simple example would be technically, a foreigner is not allowed to own land in Indonesia. But I can open a company. The company is 100% owned by me, and the company, because it's an Indonesian company, the company can own land. So it's just a workaround for the most part. And I think, you can almost find that in almost any industry where there's certain areas that are gray, and there's just do you find the loopholes? Do you find the areas that you can work around to make things work? It's just taking a different perspective on things and understanding the culture of the country that you're trying to do business in, I think is really quite important, because it does help you reframe things in a way that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point right there, which is understand the culture that you're operating within, and that way you'll be able to contribute to the culture in potentially a positive way, but it can also contribute to you and allow you to amplify that which you really care about. And so that's a big one. I really appreciate that perspective. I'm curious, Ian. Now that you're traveling the world and you're teaching workshop seminars, what are you focusing on in these seminars and workshops? What are you teaching, and what are people excited about learning about from you?
So most of my workshops now have kind of been focused on uh, handstands as far as a kind of a skill, fun thing for people to learn, integrated mobility, and then also more active flexibility is kind of the main focus for most of the workshops. Overall, it's just an extension of what I do with my remote coaching and my clients that I work with, as far as more of a range-based strength training kind of philosophy. I think that one of the unique things that I've been trying to do with regards to my workshops is not only host them at, let's say, a movement studio, because I do find that they are already, a lot of those members are already kind of in a place where they're very open-minded and they're wanting to explore and educate themselves more. But I've also tried to host workshops and teach more in areas that are more on the commercial side. So, going into yoga studios, going into like a full-on commercial gym, try to go to some like CrossFit locations. I think that I even did one at like a Taekwondo studio. They like know nothing about, mobility, flexibility, only really within the context of their sport. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to expand on what they teach in other areas of the industry. Because like if I host a workshop at a yoga studio, because it's at the yoga studio, anybody who knows about the workshop, there's an automatic assumption of like what the material is going to be, and that it's basically only for yogis. And the same thing is true. Like if I did it at a CrossFit gym, like people just be like, "Oh, this is only for CrossFit people." So you could theoretically do the same workshop at 5 different kinds of studios, and you have a massively different audience that you're working with. And so it's challenging in that there's certain studios that have a bigger following than others. So it's not always a home run. But I think that there's one of my friends, we always talked about this idea that we've kind of escaped the matrix of the commercialization of fitness. And I feel like when I only go to a movement studio, then I'm only speaking to other people who have also escaped. And my big thing is I would actually try to go back into the matrix, go back into arenas where people are trying to explore things that are different than what they're working on, but they just don't know where to go or how to go about their growth process. Because like in PT, like personal trainers, they continue their education, but they're required to get continued education courses like credits. And so they're kind of stuck in this world where they're really limited by whatever options are available to them from the system that's giving them their credentials. So I'm working on the process of becoming a continued education provider, and then trying to shift into that world a little bit more and see how that goes.
That's very cool. That's very cool. What have you found? And I feel like I straddle both worlds, the matrix and out of the matrix. But what have you found? Because you have boots on the ground in the field right now, versus me, I just kind of sit behind a computer most of my days. But what have you found that those who are in the matrix, let's just say the most standardized, commercialized version of fitness, what have you found that they are stuck in? What are the beliefs that they currently have that are not serving them?
I think that the main thing that is relatively consistent among all different practitioners in various fields is that they get stuck into whatever system they're in, right? Their approach becomes very dogmatic. They listen to one individual who maybe was their first big influence, and they maybe even look to that person as being a mentor, and they basically just follow their word without any question. And I think that there's a lot of basic fundamentals and foundational stuff that is quite commonly accepted among all parts of the industry. I I think that there's just a little bit of a closed-mindedness when it comes to exploring down various avenues of how to approach things. Even if you take something as simple as, well, it's simple or complicated, however you look at it, but like powerlifting, and you have three main lifts that are performed, or even Olympic weightlifting, right, where there's like two main movements that are being performed. And if you look at the approach performed in various countries, there's a lot of differences, and there's a lot of people from all different countries that end up performing at really, really high levels. And so it's not to say that one particular like technique or system is the absolute best. It's, trying to figure out what's best for the individual. And, and that's why I'd really like to think of myself as more of an adaptive coach as opposed to like a systems coach, is that there's some basic principles that I think are really quite important, but that it doesn't necessarily, I don't really like to think of it as in a dogmatic way. I think there's always got to be some room to help people kind of experiment with things and figure things out, especially when it comes to looking at things from a injury prevention perspective. Like, for example, like a lot of people would say that good technique is important. But there's some argument to be made that actually like intentionally and purposefully practicing improper technique can also be highly beneficial. But you wouldn't say like generally like, oh, everybody should practice with bad technique, because some people will take that as, too much of an extreme. It's how do you become more intentional and mindful of your practice and understanding why it is you do whatever it is you do. I think, if we can get more down that world, I think it would actually help foster a greater community as far as being more open-minded and open source. I think there's greater growth when you have a community like that.
My friends, I want to interrupt this podcast just for 30 seconds to say that if you made it this far and up until this point, you haven't taken the time to either subscribe to the podcast or follow it on whatever platform you're listening on, to please do so. And if you have been enjoying this episode and previous episodes leading up to this one, to please go and rate and review. It helps a ton, and it only allows me to do a better job at producing these episodes for you and potentially getting more guests that can provide some amazing insight. So with that being said, thank you so much, and back to the episode. I think coaching from an adaptive perspective versus a purely technical perspective is really powerful, but it can get kind of convoluted. It can get a little philosophical. It can get abstract in ways. What is it that you have found works for you to get people to not only be interested, but adhere to an adaptive process for developing fitness, health, their body, and expression?
I think it's highly important to adapt the material and the way you talk with people to match what their interests are. Because again, like people are very, whether they admit it or not, like people are inherently selfish, and they only care about the material as much as it will actually help positively impact their own lives. So for example, like, all humans have hips, right? And it's like, we all need to do some level of like hip mobility or some hip health kind of exercises. But if I talk with I talked with my professional soccer players, and, if I only talk to him as like, oh, you do hip mobility because it's going to be good for the longevity of your career, he doesn't actually really care about that at all. But if I can actually speak to it with, in a way that actually helps him with what he actually cares about, which is his performance on the field, he's more receptive to it. So there is a certain level of like communication that's also really quite important, and knowing your audience. There's nothing inherently wrong with being a systems coach if you actually know what kind of client that is best to work within your system. I think that's a great approach. I think even if you think about basketball, like Phil Jackson was like really good about that, right? He had a system that he used, and he needed particular types of athletes to be able to run his system. And yeah, nothing wrong with that at all. I think it's where you run into problems is if you're trying to, if you take on the wrong clients and maybe you take them on purposefully and you put them in the system and, the whole thing fails and collapses, and then you blame the client that it's their fault for not being able to perform better. I think that's where it becomes an issue. So yeah, understanding what kind of coach you want to be and how you're going to talk with clients. I think that also speaks to like the greater realm of like, you see a lot of like charlatans out there in a lot of different industries promising things as far as like their system goes, but then knowing that it's probably not the best for an individual, but still selling them on like false hopes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ugh. It drives me absolutely nuts when I think about that kind of stuff because I haven't found. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, like, I'm sure you've kind of ran across, a lot of things in your career over the years where you might not necessarily agree with certain approaches. Has there been any time in your life where you kind of had to, I don't know, confront anybody or had to deal with like things that, because sometimes I know even some of the things you say, I'm sure there's people that have maybe been confrontational towards you. How do you deal with those kind of situations?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. Okay, so for me, the first thing is that when I first started coming out into the world and claiming that I knew something, I was making it all up. It was purely based on intuition, And then I would read and I would take courses and I was like, okay, now I'm getting language for that which I intuitively knew. And not only getting language, it's becoming organized. And the more I could organize these things, my creative mind, my intuition would just expand even further. And it led to me identifying a couple of universal truths when it came to human movement. And I thought, okay, if I can lean into these, I can have any technical conversation I want, but I'm going to have to choose a path for people to want to jump on board and be a part of it. So I chose specifically the CrossFit Lane, where I was teaching applied gymnastics to CrossFit-specific movements with the intention, this was my intention, people didn't care about this at all, of teaching them how to navigate their own practice, okay? But all people heard was, this is how you do a pistol, this is how you do a handstand push-up, this is how you do a muscle-up. And people would confront me on the techniques that I would teach. But when they confronted me with that, I was just kind of like, I'm just choosing this because I have to choose. I know consciously that I'm limited and that this is not the way. It's just a way that allows me to have a conversation. And anybody who would come to me that would end up being the thing. This was the problem. And I'll tell you what the problem was. Two things. One, there was a time where things were going so well for me that I didn't want to consume any content. I didn't want to hear what you had to say about something or this person had to say, because I didn't want to hear something that didn't conform to my thinking. And the reason wasn't because I didn't want to learn. It was because I was so tired. I'm like, I don't have the energy to change my ways.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. On the other end, and this is nothing against movement culture or somebody like Ido Portal, but I was basically banned for no reason from the movement culture world. I couldn't even go and take a class here in San Francisco with Johnny Sapinosa or whatever his name is. And I'm sure he's a super nice dude, but I wasn't even allowed to go there because I had a different way of thinking. I wouldn't conform to the movement culture philosophy. And I thought to myself, what is that? Why does that happen? where are we there? And that was an internal confrontation. I started thinking, am I too closed? Am I too open? Am I what's wrong with me? I started thinking. Anyways, this could lead to other conversations, but what comes up for you as I share that? I know I didn't answer your question specifically, but I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
No, for sure. I mean, you hit some really good points. I think that, um, yeah, the problem that ends up coming across for most people is that they self-identify with a particular lifestyle or a particular modality or whatever, right? So they say like, I am a yogi, Astanga, right? Or I am, CrossFit, or I am movement. And um, it's really hard to have like deep, like in-depth conversations or discussion around someone's belief instead of, just focusing on these ideas and seeing them as just ideas and not a personal attack on that person as an individual. Um, and there is, I find that in my younger days, I would have also been quite confrontational with people. I mean, not to the extent where we'd be like fighting or anything like that, um, but almost like to a certain degree, it would have the appearance of like I'm attacking their ideology or their belief system. Um, but I think that it's really good I find that if you just ask more questions that and ask for answers as to why they're doing certain things, that they kind of, to an degree, like end up questioning themselves. And it's not done in a way that you're actually looking for, um, to kind of like have their ideologies or their belief system like collapse. More so, it's just with trying to gain greater understanding. Because one of the things that I say every class is like, if there's anything, and I highly encourage questions, I highly encourage, you know, just greater understanding of the material. And if there's anything that I say or do that seems like contradictory or doesn't make logical sense, like it's something that should be explored. And I think it's really hard to look in the mirror and question your own, belief systems and how you go about things. I think that people are more welcoming of dialogue and discussion when they know that they're not being attacked for the way they think. Um, and also too, like, because like coming across so many different people and so many different training like modalities, I don't, it's really hard to say if there's like one thing that is the ultimate way of doing things, understanding that there's so many different ways of going about every aspect of life. There's no one size or one key that like fits everything. So, there's so much that goes into the spectrum of individuals that are present in this world. And I think that taking everything into consideration, you could theoretically come up with the most like quote unquote perfect system, but if an individual is unable to actually follow through with it and actually apply it, and it's not worth it, it's not perfect. So I think that, I think that's what I always liked about having having conversations with you is that you're definitely not as, well, at least through my interactions with you, you're not as confrontational as I am, with not as disagreeable, to kind of take words from Jordan Peterson is, I would say I'm a relatively quite disagreeable person, but over the years, I've worked to like be much more open in the way I speak with people and try to focus on just understanding the people that I'm interacting with, as opposed to trying to put my ideas onto other people.
Yeah. Well, I think being disagreeable is needed, because otherwise fools like myself can just run amok and potentially be damaging. And I agree with that. What I would like to get to is to a place where we are capable as human beings, as practitioners, coaches, as people who care about developing expertise, not experts because we're always in development, but developing expertise, knowledge and understanding in certain materials to be able to navigate the spectrum. Because what seems to apply today is not necessarily what will apply tomorrow. And as we can't really predict tomorrow, we are always operating under some assumption. And assumptions are a problem, especially if you're doing something like rocket science, right?
Yeah.
And although I think there's a lot of scientific evidence and we can be evidence-based in our approach when it comes to human development and especially physical development, there's a lot of gray, there's a lot of unknown, and my sense is that the more we can acknowledge that, the more opportunities we're going to have. Furthermore, we're going to need to be collaborative in our efforts, and we're going to have to align somewhere, even if we fully disagree on our values and principles for operation. And the question is, how do we do that? I don't have the answer, but I do think it starts with this.
Oh, for sure. And yeah, that's why I also, incorporate a lot of philosophy or even analogies in the kind of conversations that I have with people. I think that there's a lot to be said about, practical living, and a lot of conversation, the topics that we're talking about now, you can find some level of it in the books and conversations that Greek philosophers were having way back in the day, and not just the Greeks, but Buddhists as well, and almost in any kind of philosophy, you can see that the practical things or components of life that people are concerned with nowadays. You see it in all the self-development kind of books. These are things that people have been working on for the lifetime of humans, and I don't think, I'm definitely not smart enough to figure out what is the ultimate answer. But one of the big things that ends up being an issue is that, even if we did find the most perfect system of like what is the best way or best approach to anything, at the end of the day, it's like we're still humans and we act on a very behavioral level, and it's like, can you actually follow through with that, with those systems or structure or anything? So, and all that just takes time and experience. And so this is where I, think about, in Bali, there would be a lot of people saying that you should eat intuitively, you should live intuitively. They use the word intuition a lot, but when you're 21 and you don't know much at all, it's like you can't. What are you basing your intuition off of, right? There's no experience or information or any semblance of structure. That's like it's not really a true sense of freedom when you don't have any experience to base things off of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think intuition at a young age leads to speed, and speed can be favorable, especially if you're trying to learn quickly, but it can also be damaging and inherently risky. And I think if you integrate something like a Zen philosophy into your life when leading from intuition, you can be intuitive as long as you do one thing at a time. You can be intuitive as long as that which you choose to do slowly and methodically. And I think there's something to that. And I don't think as humans that it's possible to decouple intuition from operating from a place of practicality. So it's a challenging thing. It's either you learn it early or later. It's going to come and get you. I'm curious. Do you agree with what I just said? Does that resonate in any way, or does it feel like I think there's a way of navigating this that is that
Yeah, I mean, I think
is potentially systematic.
yeah, there's always gonna be a fluid thing where you're working back and forth. I think that um, you know, typically for most people when they're beginners at something, generally having a good structure or system in place uh, helps them develop. You know, for some faster than others. But there's always going to be a place in a time where you need to start behaving and acting more on an intuitive level, but it's always going to be a constant back and forth. So, um, through my own personal training, there's a lot of things that I would do intuitively, but that still doesn't mean that I'm not gonna, you know, place some kind of structure and use all the things that I have available to me as far as tools. Um, I think it's there's this idea of like within the context of life where we want to engineer um, certain aspects of life, and these are the things that we can take direct action towards. But then there's this mystical side or this unknown side of life, and yeah, we want to have the capacity to be able to formulate structures to work within, have some level of intuition that we can, use to help make better decisions. But there's always going to be another aspect of everything that we have no awareness of. I think there's an interesting fluidity to life that is, the overall formula is relatively unknown. But I think if you're doing things with proper intention and some level of mindfulness, is like you may obviously still make a certain level of mistakes along the way, but the idea is to continue to progress.
Hmm. Yeah, it's in my interpretation of what you do as a practitioner and a coach is you're somebody who's trying to bring people to a state of being that allows for them to be as adaptive as possible. And within that adaptive state, living in a place internally that feels like nirvana, where I am fully detached. I am not trying to control that which is out of my control. I am stoic in my relationship to this. Is that statement that I just made to some degree true? And if so, where can you add truth to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's funny with regards to like stoicism and nowadays when there's a certain degree where people will think of, if you identify with stoicism, that you're inherently emotionless or you're cold or you're purely just a critical thinker. You don't care about the emotional state of life. But if you look at Buddhism as a philosophy, they have a lot of actual similarities in the way they think about emotions and how these external factors should, in theory, have little to no impact on the way you behave. And the idea that that we can't like we can use emotions in just understanding like how to some extent they influence our intuition and vice versa, but to understand that we can have them and process them and understand like why it is like those things are happening, but to not have those emotions at the end of the day dictate our behavior. And I think there's a level of like, at the end of the day, is like some level of practicality in how people approach their lives, I think is really quite important. Um, Again, like there's a lot of the theory and a lot of things that people can talk about that could be highly beneficial. But for me, at the end of the day, it's are they able to actually follow through with it? And I think that's a really important part of this. It's kind of one of the big components to cognitive behavioral therapy. And if you have a chance, I don't know if you've read like Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. It's there's, yeah, it means like you want to find purpose in your life. You want to find the practical things that you can actually do to help you become a better person. Um, there's a lot of interesting conversations that we can have, and like I have with other friends about things that most people generally are just not ready for. Most of my clients, especially when they're starting on nutrition, like they have a hard time just eating whole food, right? It's like, that's like one thing. It's just like, this is really hard. I think trying to, with regards to like health coaching, is like trying to find how you can meet people where they're at and then help them progress in a manner that, is sustainable and allows them to be consistent with their improvement. But I think, I would say for most of my workshops and the way I try to talk with people is just, again, it's like trying to figure out where they are at in their life and how they can actually work to implement and integrate these things to go down whatever path they want to go. There's a lot of like in the practical component that I would focus on.
Yeah. You bring up some interesting points here. Yeah, there's so many different conversations we could have around this. But for example, in CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy, a lot of times what happens is that you go to a therapist and you realize that just by talking about something, you're solving your own problems. The therapist is not really solving anything for you. It allows you to process out loud, and the best therapists are the ones that ask the best questions that prompt the expression of the thoughts that are in your unconscious that you needed to become aware of. That's one really interesting thing. On a personal note, this is something that I've noticed several times, and I've been guilty of this in the past, which is a lot of times when I'm experiencing something that I can't fully rationalize, I can't comprehend, comes with an elevated emotion, I have a very few group of people, like a small group of people that I can reach out to share these things with. And the reason is because some of these people that I reach out to, let's say I reach out to a friend, and let's just say that this friend is also a man, they usually tend to want to solve the problem for me. When in reality is like, I'm not looking for anybody to solve my problems. I'm aware that I need to solve my own problems. I don't want to be fixed. I just want to be heard for a second, so I can speak out loud what I'm thinking, so that I can ask myself whether this is true or not. And that's interesting because that relates to therapy or CBT specifically, when it comes to having that with friends or other practitioners, your community. And ultimately, what prompts one to reach out for help or express something that is alive in them is an emotion. And I don't know if you read Lisa Feldman Barrett's work and her book, How Emotions Are Made, but I highly recommend it. And in a nutshell, her whole thesis and the research that she's doing is that emotions are a construct that happen in an instance by the brain to prime the body physiologically to take the next action. And it's all done because one of the main functions of the brain is to predict what's going to happen next. And it's very interesting how emotions play a part in how we behave and how we see the world. In other words, it's like our emotions are the lens through which we see the world. Furthermore, what's interesting about this is that through the lens of Stoicism, it's the relationship to our emotions and how we either react to them or respond to them that determine how well we live. And Stoicism is so nuanced that I love that you are exploring these ideas and that you are attaching them to, I want to be careful with the term attachment, because we know that in Buddhism, attachment leads to suffering, but you are connecting them. You are connecting them to movement and mobility, because I think it's fundamental for people to explore this side of what it means to be human at this time and this period in our evolution collectively. That's me just kind of ranting and reflecting at you, because there's so many ways that we could talk about this. But what comes up for you when I say that? And yeah, where's your mind going?
Yeah, I look at, I look at the physical practice of, let's say for example, like handstands is a practice that, has gained a lot of popularity over the years. It's quite, it can be quite a frustrating process. There's a lot of times where people kind of lose motivation, get angry, get frustrated, get excited, get happy, like so many things that happen in one's journey, at different points of their practice. And I think there's a lot of things that you can learn from the way you train and how you train, and take those things and apply it to the real world. Inherently, to a degree, it's not really all that different than a long-term like yoga practitioner, right? The idea is like, you have this mat, like in this moment in time, like this is your world, and you're going through a particular process, and it's a daily consistent process. It's a form of, for some, a form of meditation and a form of introspective practice. Like, I think that there's a lot of opportunity to integrate like practical things for your life or for living, or how you deal with problems, and you can actually start working on some of those skills or developing some of those aspects of your life through your training. I think it goes against when I would say a large part of the commercial industry is, where basically you just jump on a machine and you just kind of like mindlessly kind of going through things. I think there's like a real process that you can take as far as being very mindful and intentional with your training, that can actually help you develop yourself training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, deliberate practice. I mean, if I just go out for a run, I'm not really thinking about my running technique most of the time. I'm not thinking about how I'm running. I'm just running. But when I am deliberate about how I'm doing it, I only last a short period of time, which tells me that my ability to be intentional in how I move is something that I'm limited to. Do you find this to be true? Is this part of the conversation that you have? And if so, how does it show up? For example, if you're teaching somebody a handstand, or is the handstand itself, because it requires such an intentional approach, does that inform deliberate practice, or does that encourage deliberate practice? Yeah, how do you integrate these things?
Try to think about, it's particularly like when they're more of a beginner, you're looking at setting basic guidelines or structure as to like what are the things that they should look to improve upon. And some of the things that ends up happening with a lot of people is obviously with the movement that is quite technical, is they will they'll think of everything, and not be able to be successful, or don't really see much improvement. And it just ends up being, for most people, it just ends up being a guessing game. Or they might be focused or being intentional with the wrong components, or, they're performing a drill, but they're actually intending to do something else. So their perspective of what their practice is. I think really the simplest thing that I do is just bringing their attention to what it is that they actually want to try and accomplish with any particular drill, and trying to bring their attention back to the foundational kind of component. So, I find that people are so focused with, their legs and their hips and everything above the shoulders, not even understanding that their shoulders are completely out of position. And so I think that, and not even having the awareness of where are they feeling weight in their foundation, like where is the weight in their hands. They're almost oblivious to it because they don't even think about it. They're just so concerned with trying to balance that they kind of lost focus on the most foundational part of the movement that would actually give them the ability to balance. So I think, at the end of the day, I can teach people all these different exercises or different movements or whatever. But I think probably one of the most important aspects of it is just making sure that that they're actually doing what they're intending to do. So is the reality matching what their perspective is, and is their intention and mind and their focus in the right place?
Yeah. When you teach these workshops and seminars, do you teach a theory portion, or is there a framework that you try to instill within the session throughout? Do you have a structure like that?
I try to be very integrated with every, I don't necessarily like to have 30, 60 minutes where all I'm doing is theory and then we start practicing them. But there's usually we'll talk about a few minor points, and then as we practice, we try to integrate them as quickly as possible. Because there is, especially with things like flexibility, it's you can talk about the theory all you want, but it's significantly more about the feeling of the movement. And I think handstands are the same way. It's you can talk about how everything needs to be stacked and all these things, but it doesn't matter when you get upside down because everything kind of goes out the window. You have to be able to feel it and experience it. So I generally would find significantly more benefit in not only me being able to try and get to as many different people throughout the session to give them some level of feedback, but actually also teaching them how to properly use tools like the wall to gain greater awareness.
I know you probably lost your AirPods, which is totally fine.
Yeah, I think they're beeping or something.
Yeah, it's all good. You can take them out, and
Okay.
we'll still be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, go on, please. So I think one of the things that you were really getting to was this idea of performance by feel, and then allowing people to simply express themselves, and you coming in to address what they need individually.
Yeah. So again, it's just providing some direction, right? I think that direction is really important. Making sure that they're intentional with their movements and helping them just gain greater awareness as to how are they using external tools to benefit them, or how are they using them that actually hinders their progress. And also too, understanding how to gain some level of awareness of where they might be lacking in their movement, and what are the tools to actually be able to help them improve on those areas. There's it at the end of the day, it's all about the idea of being able to teach them to be able to extend their training and apply these things beyond just the workshop. Because in just an hour or 3-hour session, or even 12 hours over 2 days, there's a lot that can be learned from an informational perspective. But, the last thing I want is for all that information to then get put on their bookshelf and nothing ever happens. The greater benefit is how is this actually going to change their training over the course of years, and how much time is it going to save them from, maybe not making the same kind of mistakes that I've made, but also too, mitigating problems and injuries. the injury prevention, the prehabilitation component I think is really quite important.
Yeah, that's huge. And I have two questions here. How do you make things memorable? And how do you think about prehab?
I think with regards to being memorable, I think I use analogies a lot. I try to either connect it with like something funny or something that is related to the individual that I'm speaking with. I think that, yeah, if you're able to connect it to something that is a little bit more personable, or because actually a lot of times people won't necessarily remember like a tip or a cue, but they'll just remember like a story that I told. And then the story helps relate it back to, that time that we're working on certain things. What was the second part?
Yeah, the second part was more of a technical one. How do you think about prehab and why prehab? What is prehab?
Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of people right now that have like this infatuation with corrective exercises. I think they can be beneficial, and that's, I guess, like maybe why I like the term like integrative mobility or more integrative prehabilitation. And because at the end of the day, it's like, for example, like you can do all the external rotation exercises that you want for your shoulders, but how is that actually going to help you doing handstand push-ups, or how is that actually going to help you perform better? And I think it's one of the components of many that are kind of missing in general rehabilitation treatments, like as far as physical movement is concerned. I think that you can work on a particular joint or a particular movement in isolation, and it can be helpful to a certain degree. But as far as working on things like flexibility, when you're really getting deep into those end ranges and you're really having to work with your nervous system, there's you have to be able to build some level of control at those end ranges that build trust with your nervous system that I think for a lot of people is lacking. So I generally talk about the relationship with nervous system and getting injured as the nervous system is like an overprotective mother. And if you experience an injury or discomfort at a particular position or end range or whatever, that's like if you left the house, you got hurt, and then your mom is like, you're not going there anymore. You're coming back in the house. You're not doing anything. And your mom, because they're being protective, which is what your nervous system is kind of there to do, they're not going to let you do it again until you rebuild that trust. And so helping people kind of like understand like what would be the kind of the more regressed actions or movements or things they can do to kind of help build that back up, I think is really quite important. And so for me, I primarily focus more on being able to be active and have control with regards to flexibility goes. So, being able to perform like internal external rotation or, hip movements at end ranges to kind of work on gaining more strength and understanding at those positions. But with anything as far as like training experience goes, like you need more time in those positions to be able to build certain levels of comfort that will allow you to get deeper and get into more intense positions. And I think that's really quite important, is like, like, are you breathing properly? Like, are you in the right mindset? Are you creating a situation where you're suffering and all you can think about is how quickly you can get out of that situation? It's like you're not building any trust with the nervous system if you're always doing that.
Yeah, I like that idea of movement trust. When it comes to just specifics, shoulders, hips, what are some of the movement trust exercises that you recommend?
Um, yeah, so when I think about manipulating the body positioning and working on different movements or exercises, I really like, I want to put people in position where they have full control over the range that they're working on, they're training. So, I break down most movements in three ways, as far as like having these three kind of components. Like, one is the range that you're working, the strength that's required for that particular exercise or movement, and then the skill component. And that skill involves a few things, whether it be like balance or the technical aspects of what the movement requires, especially if it's something that's dynamic. But having people understand that the more flexibility something requires, naturally, the less strength they're able to demonstrate. The more skill something takes, the less strength and flexibility they can generally demonstrate. So when I'm working with somebody, let's say they have a shoulder discomfort, trying to focus on like moving through that range in a manner that allows them to maintain control while also minimizing the risk of injury. So an example that I would give is like, if you're doing a push-up and you couldn't push yourself off the ground, you're very unlikely to hurt yourself. You might burst a blood vessel in your eye or your forehead or something, like with the struggle, but you're not really nothing really is bad gonna happen. But if you did a bench press where you have this external weight that is being lowered down and you're just not able to lift it off, you have this external tool that you have to worry about. And I think that the same basic idea can be used with regards to like training shoulder flexion, or whatever it might be. It's the joint or the area that you have tightness, or the area you're hurt. It should be worked on and trained as soon as you possibly can, as far as like coming out of an injury. You just have to find the right range and the intensity which to work it. So if you hurt your shoulder and you only have the capacity to lift up your phone, like that in itself is already like it's work, like you're getting things done. It doesn't necessarily need to shift so fast into actually using like heavier weights or loads. And then working, with gravity, working with different body positions to be able to train the joints and the body different ways, I think is quite important. Not just shoulder position or joint positioning, but what is the direction of movement while in those positions? So, can you be in maximal, shoulder flexion to help you gain greater shoulder stability for the handstands? Your shoulders are obviously moving in a lot of different ways, so you need to train your shoulders in all those ways as well. So it's just about managing the range and the intensity. I think those are, pretty simple foundations.
Yeah, those are pretty simple foundations, but important ones. I'm curious, how much undoing do you need to do? Meaning, although being technique specific is not always the way, a lot of people develop patterns that lead to either pain or not being able to achieve certain performance goals that they have. And in order to do that, there needs to be a reprogramming, reconditioning, a prehab, potentially a development of movement trust, new movement trust through new mechanics. How much of undoing do you need, or do you specifically spend time doing when you work with people, or is that not a thing?
No. I mean, there's so typically most people are experiencing, from my experience with all my clients and Nirvana over the years, it's usually an accumulation problem, right? It's something that's been building up over years of time. So I do find a combination approach of using mobility, flexibility exercises in combination with continued practice of the of the particular skill, I think is important. Again, you need to, again, you can do all the external rotation exercises you can think of, but movement is very dynamic and requires a combination of muscles and joints to work together. And though I would say you would use, certain prehabilitation or the likes of exercises to help facilitate that process. But I think, yeah, as soon as you possibly can, you would work on the more skill or technical movements. Obviously, you'd still manage for the intensity and the range that you're working. But also, there's a lot of corrective cues that you can make while they're performing more skilled, like more movements that require higher skill levels. That also helps them just start to reprogram their nervous system a little bit more. There's also adding in like soft tissue work, tension release exercises that can kind of help facilitate that process as well. And typically when I talk about like the idea of using a foam roller, I know that there are some people that will spend like all their days on foam rollers. I'm a big fan of using like lacrosse balls and the like in a very intensive manner. So I generally believe that the body requires stress to make an adaptation, and if the stress is not great enough, then it's not going to change. So even with the tension release techniques that I work on with clients, they tend to be quite uncomfortable, but it should be done in a way that the client is still maintaining some level of control. So it's not something that I really teach. It's just, it takes a really long time to kind of understand how to work with the client for that kind of stuff. But it's to some degree, it's like, what's the level of pain tolerance that an individual might have? Yeah.
Yeah, a relationship to pain and discomfort is a big one. Is that a cornerstone of the conversations that you're having?
Yeah. So typically, again, it's like if you're working on your nervous system and you're going towards end ranges or you're going into positions that the body's just not comfortable in, usually it's going to either respond with sending pain signals, telling you basically not to go there because it doesn't trust you to do so, or it's going to restrict your movement to go into that position. So a lot of times, again, for me, it's about reducing the range that you might be working on or reducing the intensity in which you're doing it. You'll find that, like, for example, maybe someone is having shoulder discomfort when they get into their handstand. But if they're just standing and they raise their arms above their head, they might not have any pain. And so, I mean, inherently, the only thing that's really different is the intensity in which the joint's being worked. And so we just got to find a better way to manage the intensity relative to that position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the artistry of coaching and being a practitioner in that way, where you're finding the ways to help the body adapt, the individual adapt. I'm curious now, on the more technical side, how important is data and metrics in doing what you do? I think you're wearing a ring right now that does track some of your biometrics. Yeah, how important is data?
Data is only as important as you're able to use it. Like, so I have like this Oura ring, and I just got like a new watch, and I get information, but I really only check it like once or twice a week. I think when I first got it, I was like super gung-ho, and like every day I was checking it, like every hour I was like looking at all the information, and I was just getting too caught up in it. I think, you want to do as much as you can at the beginning to kind of get a general sense of like what's working for you as far as being as optimal as you can. And then, so like now it's like, if I have a few drinks with some friends one night, like, and I wake up tomorrow, it's like I don't even have to look at my sleep score. Like I already know it's going to be like horrible. So for me, I use all these data points as more of like reminder or guidance, or maybe it can be used as like an accountability tool to kind of help keep me going in the right direction that I want. But I don't necessarily prescribe to being super intense with the data points or the information. It's different if you're a professional athlete and you're trying to like reach certain goals and you want to, hit certain numbers or whatever. It's like, for sure, I think more information, the better, and the more you can use it to guide you in the right direction, the better. But again, it's like the average person who I would say for the most part I kind of like work with, though, they're not overly concerned with it. And I think it's more important for the coach to understand the information so that they can use it to help build a better like program or build better protocols for their client to follow. But I wouldn't put that on the client to a large degree, because it's kind of the responsibility, I think, of the coach to do so. Yeah,
that's a big one. I think data is helpful for developing awareness, helping people become aware of certain behaviors, patterns, consequences of your behaviors, and then teaching them how to attune to that, or become more aware of how one's behaviors is affecting one, and how now it's manifesting by feel is at the core. And then seeing if there's a translation, because we were born naked, we're gonna die naked, and we're gonna go leave this world naked. We're not gonna have that data necessarily isn't there. So the feeling is a big one, and I like what you said. That makes sense to me. I'm curious, Ian, now just to bring this to a gentle close, what are you excited about? Furthermore, do you allow yourself to get excited?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm still like passionate about teaching. I still love being in a room with other people who are, really interested in working on themselves and progressing in that manner. So I definitely want to maintain that to some degree, like whether, I do want to continue doing these workshops, for at least for the foreseeable future. But I would always hope to be able to do some level of like live thing, probably until I die, I suppose. And I think that, it's really hard to say. Like, I'm actually very excited about the unknown. Like, I am excited that I'm in a place where I've never actually been in before. Like, I'm technically without a job, and like a job in the sense that I'm not working for a business or a company. I just gotten out on my own for the most part, and having a lot of opportunities kind of come my way. I think those are things to be very excited about. So it's like the idea of like unlimited possibilities. So I think that's quite good, and let's see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. That's it's cool. Last question: if you had a message that's kind of like your closing remarks, for people listening here today, or if you're in a conversation with people who have come to learn from you, what's the all-encompassing message that is currently alive in you? And this, of course, doesn't have to be true tomorrow, but what's alive in you right now in terms of messaging and call to action?
I think, I would say, you want to have an introspective practice. You want to have, whether that's meditation or going for a walk or journaling, to help you like process and prepare your day or review your day. I think that as far as like a corrective feedback tool for yourself on a day-to-day basis, I think is really quite important. I also think that social discourse or having just like discussions with people, I think is really quite important. And then to combine that, I would also say like seek out mentors or seek out people that you find to provide valuable information. And I was actually speaking with one of the students at the workshop yesterday, and we talked about like, even for myself, even though I generally know like what I probably should be doing with regards to my training, but I get to a point sometimes where my coaching side doesn't want to have anything to do with my athlete side, and so I outsource my programming sometimes to people who I trust and people who I know are really good, and I entrust in them to basically give me the program so I don't have to think about it. I do it. I, give them my videos and they give me feedback. And so I do that usually with people who are also probably much better than me as far as handstands or flexibility stuff goes. Any opportunity that you can get, and it doesn't necessarily need to be paid stuff. There's a lot of free things out there as far as like podcasts, YouTube, and the like. But yeah, if you have the opportunity to learn from someone who's more advanced or is more knowledgeable, like you're not just, I suppose people only think of it as like you're buying maybe the information that they're giving you, but for me actually is like I'm buying time, back, right? It's like if I can, go to a workshop that's 2 days long and I learn 2 or 3 things that save me, 3 years of my life from making mistakes or possibly getting injured because I shouldn't have. I think it's hard for people to think of it because it's all unknown kind of things. But I think putting some attention and some of your resources into finding a mentor or quote unquote master, because I do think that even the basic concept of an apprenticeship is quite lost. You don't really see those kind of opportunities that much anymore, but I think they're still highly valuable because there's only so much you can learn from books. It's like you actually need to experience these things and figure it out for yourself.
Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, I agree with the mentor. I agree with having social discourse, super important, and an introspective practice. So yeah, very cool. Good takeaways. Ian, thank you so much for your time and for sharing. This has been a pleasure. And I think we're going to have to continue the conversation. And it seems like in Istanbul, what time is it there? It's pretty late, right?
It's about 8:45 p.m.
Yeah. I did hear that there was some activity in the background. So maybe they're praying, chanting.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it's a mosque, I imagine. Yeah, so if people heard that, I don't think people will hear it, but if people heard that, now you know what you were listening to. We got the full experience.
Well, yeah, thank you so much, Carl. I appreciate you have me on. I look forward to possibly having more conversations in the future and keeping in touch. And always excited to see what you're doing and what you're up to. And hopefully we'll be able to link up in person soon.
I would love that. If you come through the U.S. on your world tour, let's make sure that happens.
For sure.
Awesome. Thank you, Ian. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
This is the freestyle way.